All right, hey Facebook Live, my name is Tade and I'm an enrolled agent with the IRS, and I'm also the member experience manager at Stride for our tax product, Stride Tax. I'm gonna wait just a minute for a few more people to join the broadcast, and then we'll get started with some quarterly tax information. Okay, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So did you know that a lot of self-employed workers need to pay quarterly taxes? A surprising number of Stride's members don't know that fact, and a lot of you are self-employed. So we're gonna go through some quarterly tax information so that you're up to speed on whether or not you may owe. So today I'm gonna cover the deadline for quarterly taxes, who needs to pay them, how to calculate what you owe, and then how to figure out if you owe them in the first place. So before we get started, be sure to like this broadcast and share it with all of your self-employed friends so that they can hop on and get ready for the June 17th quarterly tax deadline with us. And if any questions or comments come up during this Facebook Live, feel free to drop them in the comment box below, and we'll get to them and answer them after the broadcast. So firstly, what are quarterly taxes? So quarterly taxes are estimated tax payments made to the IRS throughout the year instead of all at once on tax day in April. So as some of you may know, the US has a pay-as-you-go tax system, which means that we're all required to pay our share of taxes throughout the year rather than only once per year like a lot of people think. So in fact, if we all owe more than $1,000 in taxes for the entire year, then we're required to make federal tax payments at minimum 4 times per year. So 1/4 of what we owe every 3 months. Now, if you're panicking and wondering if you should have been paying taxes 4 times a year your entire life and you haven't been, don't worry, you're probably fine. It's okay. That's because there are a couple different ways to pay those taxes. So one would be withholding taxes from your paycheck. That's a form of paying the taxes that we owe throughout the year. If you're a W-2 employee, so you're traditionally employed, then that's what's probably been happening for you. And that's why you don't have to pay quarterly taxes. And the second way would be to make estimated tax payments 4 times per year, which is what a lot of self-employed 1099 workers do. So let me go into a little bit more detail about those 2 different ways. So for those of us who are traditionally employed and work for an employer, and by traditional I mean you're classified as an employee, you receive a paycheck that has taxes withheld from it, you have your earnings reported to you on a W-2, and you're not an independent contractor. That's what I mean by traditionally employed. Then the taxes that are withheld from your paycheck by your employer are then remitted to the IRS on your behalf. And that's the form of you paying your fair share of taxes throughout the year, is via the paycheck that has taxes withheld from it. You can consider tax withholding almost like a benefit that your employer is providing because it's taking a little bit of the tax work out for you. So that's why people who just work for one employer don't usually need to pay quarterly taxes, because their tax payments are already being handled by their employer and being sent to the IRS for them. So quarterly taxes are what you need to pay if you owe more than $1,000 in taxes for the year and your taxes aren't being remitted on your behalf by an employer or some other kind of entity. So that's why quarterly taxes really often apply to self-employed people like real estate agents or Uber drivers or any kind of freelancer or contractor, because taxes are not being withheld from your pay. You are your own employer when you're self-employed. So there's no one on the other end withholding taxes from your pay for you and then sending that money to the IRS for you. So you are now responsible for figuring out how much you owe in taxes and then making those tax payments throughout the year for yourself. So the way that you make those payments is it's based on an estimation of your income for the current year. So most people can use their previous year's taxes as kind of a guide. So if you tend to make around the same amount of money every year, you tend to owe just about the same amount of money in taxes per year, then you can kind of use your past tax returns to figure out what you might owe for this year. So that's one way that a lot of people go about figuring out how much they should pay. But you could also just go through the process of estimating your taxable income for the upcoming year and then paying quarterly taxes based on what you estimate you're going to make. So a question that I get really often is, how do I know if I owe quarterly taxes? And I usually tell people that a good rule of thumb is if you are self-employed and you're turning a profit, you're probably going to owe quarterly taxes. It just tends to be how it works out. So as a reminder, you can figure out if you're making a profit if your self-employment income is higher than your business deductions. So if what you're taking in for your business is much more than what you're paying to keep your business running and keeping the lights on, then you're turning a profit. And it's probably pretty likely that you're going to owe quarterly taxes. So a good thing to keep in mind is that it's possible you're already paying enough in taxes throughout the year. For example, if you have both a W-2 job where your taxes are withheld from your paycheck and a part-time job. So let's say you work part-time and maybe drive for Uber in your spare time when you can. You would have a W-2 job and a part-time independent contractor kind of job. And you typically get a tax refund, then it's probably less likely that you're gonna owe quarterly taxes. In that case, a lot of your tax liability would pretty much be covered because there are already taxes being withheld from your paycheck, and if you're getting a refund, then it's already pretty clear that you're overpaying in taxes throughout the year. Keep in mind that this can be common for people who have received a refund in the previous year's tax year and then use that refund to cover their upcoming year's taxes. So if you typically receive a refund and then choose to put it towards your future tax liability, then it would also be pretty unlikely that you would owe quarterly taxes because you're already putting money towards what you would owe in taxes for the upcoming year. I know a lot of the information that we just went over could be pretty confusing, so if you have questions or comments about what you just heard, feel free to drop them in the comment box and we can get to them after we end. So another question that I get pretty commonly is, what if I didn't earn that much last year? So does that mean that I don't owe quarterly taxes? And the answer is it could mean that. So if you only earned a little bit in profit, you still may need to pay quarterly taxes, but it depends on how much you made. So if you expect to owe $1,000 or more in taxes for the year after you factor in tax credits, which reduce how much you owe, then the IRS will still expect you to make quarterly tax payments. So put simply, if you have income that didn't have taxes withheld from it, and you expect to owe more than $1,000 in taxes on all of your combined income for the year, then you should consider paying quarterly taxes. Okay, so next, how do I calculate what I owe? So the IRS has a form called Form 1040-ES, and that's basically a worksheet that you can use to figure out how much you're gonna owe in taxes for the year so that you can figure out if you owe quarterly tax payments or not. So it's basically just gonna ask you a couple of questions about your income, a couple of questions about your deductions. It'll ask you your filing status, and it's asking you all those questions so that it can first figure out what your adjusted gross income is, your AGI, and then it's gonna use that information to figure out what your taxable income is, which is the amount of income that you pay taxes on. And then once we know that taxable income estimate, then we can figure out how much you're probably going to owe in taxes. So it is all based on an estimate of what you think you're gonna make throughout the year, what you think you're gonna be able to deduct, and what you think your filing status is gonna be. But if you feel pretty confident about those numbers, then it's a pretty good indication of what your taxable income is gonna be, and therefore how much you're gonna owe in taxes. So it is an estimate, so if you think that you're maybe gonna make more money this year than you did last year, or if you think you're gonna make less than you did last year, then you can kind of adjust your estimates up and down to kind of match what your expectations are for your income for the coming year. You're really shooting for a ballpark estimate, is what you're aiming for. So once you fill out this worksheet, it's gonna help you figure out what your taxable income is and then how much you're gonna owe in taxes. And once you have that number, if it's over $1,000, the amount that you owe in taxes, then you should divide that owed tax number by 4 and pay that amount each quarter. So let's say you go through the worksheet and you figure out that you're gonna owe about $2,000 in taxes for the entire year. You should divide it by 4 and then make a payment of $500 at every quarterly tax deadline so that you can cover your tax liability throughout the year. Okay, and once again, add questions about all that information below if you need to. Okay, so let's say you've gone through that process and you figured out that you do owe quarterly taxes and you know how much you need to be making in payments for each quarterly tax deadline. How do you go about doing that? So firstly, you should know that you won't have to fill out any forms to send to the IRS. That worksheet, that Form 1040-ES that we talked about, is just a worksheet for your own benefit. You won't have to send it in to anyone. The only thing that you're gonna have to do now that you know whether you owe and how much you owe is just make your payment to the IRS. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. Probably the easiest would just be to make your payment online. You can go to the IRS website and then put in some information and make your payment, and it'll just be recorded by the IRS as being attached to your Social Security number. If you have read the Stride blog post about quarterly taxes, we have a couple of links in there that can take you to the exact place where you need to do that. So that's one option. You can pay online, and you can pay with your credit card if you need to. The other option would be to send a check into your local IRS office. And as long as it's postmarked by the date of the deadline, then you're good to go. Then you'll still be considered as making the deadline. But that's really it. You won't need to send in any other kind of paperwork along with it. You can just send in the payment itself. Okay, so another question that I get pretty commonly is, what happens if I don't pay quarterly taxes and I instead just wait to pay all my taxes in April when I file my taxes? That's a pretty common question. I would definitely recommend, if you know that you owe quarterly taxes, I would definitely recommend paying them as soon as you can. Reason being, there is a late payment penalty attached to those taxes if you don't pay them by those deadlines. And late payment penalties with the IRS accrue by month, and in some cases by day. So really the longer that you wait, the more you're gonna end up owing in penalties. So even if you've missed the deadline, it is still definitely advantageous to pay as soon as you can so that you can minimize how much you're gonna be getting in penalties. It's not like a one-time flat fee just for being late. It's gonna keep getting bigger, every day that you wait. So I would definitely pay even if you've missed the deadline before. So if you end up seeing all of this information the day after the deadline, please don't wait until the next one. Just go ahead and make the payment so you can save yourself some money. For anybody out there who's wondering what you should be doing if you maybe can't afford to pay the taxes right now, there is a couple of scenarios where you can avoid the late payment penalty. So one would be if you didn't pay due to some kind of disaster or unusual circumstance, you can usually appeal to get some kind of exception made for you. Or if you're retired or became disabled throughout the tax year, then that's another reason that the IRS would maybe let you off the hook for the payment penalties. If you're figuring out how to maybe declare that you were falling into one of those two scenarios, page 2 of form 2210 is where you need to look to be able to fill out the waivers that you need to send in to be exempt from those penalties. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that was a lot of information, so if you have questions, please comment and we can get back to you once we end this broadcast. I'm hoping everybody is feeling all set to head out and calculate and pay your quarterly taxes in time for the June 17th deadline if you figure out that you owe them. So if you found this Facebook Live helpful, be sure to like it and share it with your friends who are self-employed. Hopefully you can help them out if they're also stressed about quarterly taxes. And if you haven't already liked Stride on Facebook, do so now. That way you'll be notified the next time we go live with any more tax tips for self-employed folks like yourself. And if you're looking for more tips, guidance, and a recording of this Facebook Live, follow us on Twitter and our blog for all of the above. If you're looking to get access to our tax support team, be sure to create a Stride Tax account so you can download the Stride Tax app in the App or Play Store for free. Then you can access our team of tax experts if you have questions about self-employment taxes. And you can find more information in the comment section if you need to. Thank you.